then we'll begin. So feel comfortable to greet, meet, and yeah, nice to see you very early in the morning. Okay, very good. Yeah.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. I'm not used to being mic'd. Welcome to today, to our conversation, our continuing conversation on the Synod. I'm going to ask if we could all just take a minute to check that our phones are turned off. There's nothing more disconcerting to hear a ring in the middle of what somebody is saying. So please do that. You can't hear me? Is that better? Okay. I learn as I go. I'm Valerie Walsh, for those of you who don't know me. And I just want to remind us that 2 years ago, roughly, we were invited as a parish to enter into conversation with each other and to listen to each other carefully, all in response to the same set of questions. That was 2 years ago. Roughly a year ago, a synthesis report of what we talked about as a parish was given to Father Bourgois for his consideration, and we've seen some of the results of his reading of that in our parish as the months have gone by. A mere 6 weeks ago, the big synodal meeting in Rome ended. It had been on for a month, for the whole month of October. There were over 400 delegates at the meeting, and there were just under 400 voting members among the delegates. Among the people there, but neither a delegate nor a voting member, was Father Alan Fogarty, who is a Jesuit. And he was there not as a delegate, but he was there as a member of the media. And as a member of the media, he was listening carefully and very attentively to both what was being said and the process that was being followed through the month and what is expected to come from that. I've only met Father Alan once, and that was by phone. And all I can tell you about him, other than what I've said, is that he's the 9th child in his family. So that's the biographical detail. Along with Father Bourgois, who is likewise the 9th child in his family. So Father Alan has come today, quite happily, I think, to give us a bit of a report on what happened at the Synod, and what it means to be a synodal church. He's going to offer to us, remind us, teach us what the challenge is lying ahead, what the delegates were sent home to think about, pray about, discern before they gather again in Rome next October. And I think in all of that, he's going to challenge us to consider what it means for ourselves to be a synodal parish and what it's going to take for us to thrive like we pray that our church will thrive in this time of synodality. So enough from me. Father Alan, over to you. Oh, just one thing. When he's finished talking, we will have time for questions. No doubt there'll be many stimulated by what Father Alan is going to talk to us about. And at the time, there will be a mic, and because we are being, which will be Father Darrell will bring around to us, and I'll just remind us all to speak into the mic like I'm learning to do, because we are being live streamed for the people who couldn't be with us this morning. All right? Thank you. Father Alan.
Turn this on. It should be, now it's on? Okay, well, thank you very much, Valerie. And I think there are a lot of things that could happen this morning. It could go one way or the other, and I think we can be free to do that. Again, Valerie was noting that I was not a participant of the Synod. That was a person who was there at one of the round tables who was voting. So I was part of Cardinal Greg's media team, And that media team, about 15 of us, worked together with the Dicastery for Communication. And so together, we were working with Pope Francis to try to make sure that the right messages were communicated to the world about what was happening at the Synod in light of the confidentiality that Pope Francis was asking for at the beginning. And so that kind of immediately upset the media and so on, excuse me, because of course the media is there to pick up threads and stories and then spin them and tell them and be the first out there and so on, because that's kind of what they do. But it was very interesting at the beginning that Pope Francis called for confidentiality after the opening Mass on the 4th of October. He called the group to be very respectful of what was said in the groups, not to be in the media saying what they said themselves, and certainly not saying what someone else said in their group. And so this obviously happens for a reason, and I was joking with Father Miranda the other day and saying, you know, when in canon law there are many canons, and each canon, behind each canon there's a story, or there's a reason for that canon. And so similarly with this, there are reasons for Pope Francis requesting confidentiality. And it's clear from previous synods that he wanted this one to be different. And so what was that? So I'll pick up on that in a moment, on what was the difference, and go from there. And you can ask questions as we go along or at the end, whichever you like. I'm not sure which is best, and so you may kind of have a burning question. If you do, I'll take it. But I think in again, the spirit of synodality and what Pope Francis is hoping for the church, for all of us, and for the future of the church, we need to kind of pray. And so let's just pause for a moment and put ourselves in God's presence. This is the synod prayer that was used each day in the assembly. We are here before you, Holy Spirit, as we gather together in your name. Come to us, guide us, make yourself at home in our hearts. Teach us the way we must go, and show us the path to follow. Do not allow justice to be passed over, nor let us promote disorder. Do not let ignorance lead us down the wrong path, nor partiality influence our actions. Let us find in you our unity, so that we may journey together to eternal life, and not stray from the way of truth, nor depart from what is right. We ask this of you, who are at work in every place and time, through Christ our Lord. Amen. So, back to what it was that Pope Francis was asking for that caused the media to react, and it was pretty tense, I have to tell you, at the beginning. Because when Pope Francis was asking for this confidentiality, it meant something directly to the media. And because he used an expression, and that was that the synod participants, the whole synodal process, should be fasting from the media. And so that didn't sit well with the media, as you can imagine. And so there was a scramble at the beginning. How was it that the team that was with Cardinal Grech, which is what I was on, going to work with the Dicastery for Communication, because the Dicastery for Communication prefect, Paolo Ruffini, he's a layman, he was the president of communication for the whole synod. But then you had a manager, the coordinator of communications from the synod, so it was all, how was this going to work? And so you could see right there, between the dicastery and the Synod of Bishops communications people, where there were like, how are we going to do this? How much more so it would be with the secular media and even other religious media. So why was Francis doing this? It seemed to be very obvious that, and consistent with what Francis has been saying for the last 10 years, that he wants us to be a thinking and a praying church, but together, and he wants us to be discerning. And so, to discern, you have to do a number of things. And one of those things is to be correctly understanding your experience. You have to be articulating that experience with one another. And then you have to be listening to what was said in a different way that separates yourself from the bigger picture. And so how was this going to happen if the media was out there pushing its agenda and looking for the littlest thing to say and then try to run with it? And they did try it. So I'll tell you about that in a second. But so he's asking for the fasting from the media for the sake of discernment, and I think to give the people in the groups at the round tables, the voting members, an opportunity to be free from that kind of back looping from a session or two that took place, people going before the media and saying what they would say, and then that going out around the world, and then them going back into a group, but being aware of what was being said out there, which was a reflection that might not have necessarily been relating to the reality. So it would interfere with the progress. And so the question was, is this going to work? And I have to say it was very interesting to see, because what was determined was that we would set up press briefings, and those press briefings became daily press briefings at 2:15 in the afternoon Rome time. And it was there where people from the groups were invited to address some of the questions that the questions that the media had. And it was okay at the beginning, a risk to see, or interesting to watch what it is they would say, what they would ask. And it was predictable. And what was predicted actually happened, where you had certain journalists who came from Catholic journalism, but of a certain bent that, let's say, would be not in the middle somewhere, but they would be more to the right. And so they would ask the question, and then ask the same question the next day, wait a couple of days and ask the same question. And so finally, though, that kind of seemed to stop after a while. And I was interested in why that stopped and tried to understand it. And it just seemed to me that there was a reaction to the fasting from the media, but then people in the media watching what they could of what was happening in the Synod, and the Synod members themselves, the participants, giving press briefings. There was a consistent message with what Pope Francis was asking for, and that was confidentiality on the conversations in the Spirit. And this is what was going on. So you would have some people saying, you know, revelation has already taken place. It's done. There's no need for this. And so, you know, the idea was that, you know, grace had stopped as well, and we're just here living where grace had taken place in the past. You would have people kind of curious about the women's issues, whether they were ordination to the diaconate or priesthood, role in the church, the LGBTQ issues, and wanted to know what was happening in the voting and the decision making. So consistently and calmly and over time, the press briefings were able to diffuse that, and in so doing teach the journalists and anyone watching that what was happening in this synod was different from the past, that this was a synod on synodality. So we're not here to decide or to vote on whether women will be ordained priests. That's not what the synod was about. So that took time for people to get their head around. We're not here to decide any of those issues, but that doesn't mean to say that the issues were not discussed in the groups. And of course they were. And you can check the synthesis report. It's a public document now, as well as the letter to the people of God. And so there you start seeing, and I'm not going to go over those, but I will talk a bit about Cardinal Hullerich's talk on point B2 from the Instrumentum Laboris. So what's happening then daily? Starting at 8:45 in the morning, this prayer is read. The prayer goes on for 15 minutes, and then the groups start in their meeting sessions, and they go till 12:30. There was a lunch until 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and during that time, issues came up like ordination of women to diaconate or priesthood or LGBT or other issues that are in the church, and that came from the 2-year preparatory phase that led, like all the information that was distilled and ended up in the synod. That's what gets discussed. That will go on, and then 2:15 was the press briefing, come back at 4 o'clock till 7:30, and that was every day of the week except for Saturday, and it ended at 12:30, and then the press briefing at 2:15. So believe me, by the third week, you could start to see the wear and tear on people, because you're sitting in that room, and these are very important issues for the future of the church. Everyone knew that and had participated in their parishes, dioceses, conference level or continental level, or all of those levels, and they knew the importance of that and the discussions. So part of the process, they were asked on a topic to go away and to pray and reflect on that topic and come back, and each person would then share in the group for a maximum of 5 minutes. And so you've got 10, 12 people in a group. You can see how, just do the math, that's an hour or so. And everyone else is listening to that one person from what they prepared. So it's not a conversation where you're just sitting around saying, oh yeah, this is what I think. And everybody's going, yeah, I don't think that, I don't agree with that, you know. So there's not a conversation. It was how the sharing was happening that was, I think, again, the important piece. So each person would share, everyone else would listen, then there was another round. And in that second round, you were listening to, kind of reflecting on what others said, and that was separate from your own view. Because you were thinking of, okay, maybe I think this, but I heard this here, this is more important for the church, I can step aside my views, right? And so then issues would come up, and there would be interventions where somebody spoke on a topic, and then there would be an intervention on whether they agreed with that or what they saw the strengths and weaknesses were in that. It was very, excuse me, interesting again to see how that worked. Initially, it looked like we were going to hear the same thing over and over and over again forever. And that did happen for about the first 10 days. The same thing kept coming up. But what was that saying? I think, if anything, it was saying that this was happening around the world, whatever that topic was. Reflections were coming from people everywhere about the same thing, sometimes with cultural or regional differences, something pertaining to a particular country or culture that would flavor that point, but the basic response, the basic point was there. And again, what was beautiful about the synod, when you look over the floor, the whole floor, the media table, we had a table in the hall with everyone else, and you would look out over the 450 people, and you would see every shade of skin, every shape of eye, every hair texture, well, maybe not every language, but culture, languages, energy, men and women, cardinals, lay people. It was just this amazing mix where you knew everybody was coming from those 2 years to talk together with the Pope, who was in the sessions quite often. And so you would see this kind of repetition. You'd listen to the repetition, and then over time that repetition kind of changed, and you would start seeing people focusing on different kind of aspects that would be coming from the synod itself in October, and then interventions on that, and some concerns and some support and so on. So as this point comes up in a press briefing, so I can talk about it, because we're still not supposed to talk about what happened in the synod through to the next synod assembly in October 24. So, but this topic came up, and it was addressed to a theologian from Sri Lanka. One of the press asked the question, well, what about the LGBT? Why is that not being talked about? Why is there not this happening? Why is that, it's such an important issue, such an important issue. And it's like, so, okay, tell us something we don't know. That's an important issue. We all know that. It's like the role of women in the church. It's an important issue. It's how decisions are made. It's an important issue. So the Sri Lankan said, well, the idea, again, is that we go through this process of sharing and discussing and reflecting and interventions and dealing with common topics. But our job here is not to take a topic and vote on it and tell the Pope what to do. Our process of conversation is what we're about. So he said, not to say that the LGBTQ is not an important issue. It is an important issue. It's clearly an important issue everywhere in the world, and for different reasons. I mean, it's a different thing in Russia and than it is in Australia and in Central America from Canada and the United States, whatever. So we know that the cultural realities are there, but still that issue's there. He said, but where I'm from, but he's at the synod, people can't eat where I'm from. They don't have enough food where I'm from. They don't have a job where I'm from. There's no health care where I'm from. So that's an important issue, and it's not to say that it's more important than the LGBTQ stuff or anything else, women in the church. It doesn't. They're all important. So what was good in the press briefings and in the meetings was these kinds of realities started to emerge where you'd say, okay, if somebody arrived at the synod with a particular thing on their mind that they wanted to get going in the synod, you would see where they started to open up to realize that there were a lot of people who care a lot about the church, who showed up with an idea like they did, or two, and then they start seeing that there are many things that are important. And if they didn't think of something, or it wasn't so present to them, because it was present to someone else in their group, it became important to them. So that was a big kind of movement there. Was there a concern, again, back to the media, because that was the role I was in, was there a concern about people breaking the confidence? Well, there was, and early on, and it was a cardinal. And he gave an interview on EWTN. And some of his confreres said, you know, he shouldn't have done it. We all knew he shouldn't have done it. He only did it once, and they were surprised that he didn't say more. So they said, well, it wasn't as bad as we thought it was going to be. And there was another moment where there was a whole system that was being used by people in the synod, and you had to have access to it through a password. It's no surprise. If you look at probabilities, what would the probability be of there being a technical glitch at some point between the 4th of October and the 28th of October among 450 people? Pretty good. So there was a slip at one point, and things kind of get out, and again, you know, people were scurrying around as if it was going to be the end of the world, but it worked itself out, and people respected it, and then they were cautious. They did technical things to make sure that it didn't happen again, the best they could, and it was okay. So I'll stop for a minute because I've been talking nonstop. Questions now, and I'll have other things to say, but do you have any kind of response to anything I've said, or any curiosities or whatever? If I can answer them, I will.
One question of clarification. What does intervention mean in the process?
Okay, so there would be a topic that was up for discussion, and all the groups would have done that, and then you would have reports from the groups to the whole assembly, and then there'd be a moment for people to respond to that, and those would be called interventions. Yeah, and so, you know, to say, okay, well, we hear this, but then in my region in Slovakia or in Melbourne, it's very different. And so these are things that are to be considered. And again, remember, this is a synod that is a universal synod. So at Our Lady of Lourdes, you had groups, and you met. You produced a synthesis report that Valerie referred to at the beginning, and suggestions, topics. But again, that's coming from what? Your multi-ethnic, multicultural parish here in downtown Toronto. Take that and move it to the world level. You can see where people would say, the LGBT is important, but I come from a place where people can't work or eat and live, and then we start looking at the climate issue with Laudato Si and Laudate Deum, which Pope Francis released right at the beginning of the Synod. And so the climate issues that are affecting employment, and so it just got... But what you started to see was, this is one Catholic Church, and we have, like I say, all kinds of languages and colors and cultures all together working on the same thing, because Jesus Christ is in everybody's life who's involved. And so there's the universality of it, with the particularities being discussed that are not unimportant. And so it was a beautiful thing to see that at work. Yeah.
My name is Gus, and I'm a parishioner at Our Lady of Lourdes. And you made a comment in relationship to the Pope was present in some of the groups. I'm curious, his presence, Did he make any comments in relationship to the discussion, contribute to the discussion, or was he just there?
So, for the most part, so let's say that this is the hall, and all the tables are on the floor, and he was at a table here with Cardinal Grech, who is the Secretary of the Synod of Bishops, Cardinal Hollerich, who's the main relator, Giacomo Costa, who was a special secretary, and some others. They would rotate leaders in to guide all the discussions and interventions, and it was computerized. They'd tell you who was speaking next and so on. So mostly the guidance, especially through the Instrumentum Laboris, which was the guiding document for the whole procedure, Francis would, at times, rarely, comment on something. So yes, he did. And him being in the room and being who he is, he would show up early before, say, the general congregations. It would call the general congregation where they were dealing with new materials. It would start at 4 p.m. He'd show up at 3:15 or 3 o'clock and be at his table, and people would just go up and say hello and greet him, and he just chatted with people. So his presence there was very much appreciated, and people did what they were going to do. And said what they wanted to say, and he heard what they wanted to say, and I think he was very happy about that, because that's the way he is. That's why he was doing this and bringing people together, so that they wouldn't say, oh, he's the Pope, I can't say this. You know, I can't say this to the Pope, you know. But it was just a freeing experience. So, good question, yeah.
What is the overall objective of the Pope on calling the synodality, considering the diversities? Because we Catholics come from different cultures and countries and traditions.
Daryl, you were holding the mic too close to you, so it's hard for me to, I couldn't really make out what you
I'm sorry. May we know what is the overall objective of the Pope in calling for the synodality, considering the diversities and the cultures we come from different countries and traditions? Because I was just thinking of the process. Should it come from each country first and then it goes up?
Okay, I think if I get your question right, I mean, I'm not sure I heard it very well again, but I think the objective is where, like I said earlier, that I would speak to Cardinal Grech's points, and I should have that here somewhere. So, again, you would see where things were heading a certain direction, and the wisdom that went into, and the experience that went into the Instrumentum Laboris, and what was happening there. That process really carried things through, and people were very good to give themselves to that process, because there were moments, say, where we heard the same thing from all over the world many, many times, until it shifted, and then it started to get more particular and so on. So Cardinal Hollerich referred to the co-responsibility of the mission of the Church. So as opposed to the Pope or the Cardinal or the Bishop or the priest is going to tell you what to do, and you just need to do it if you're going to be a good Catholic, a good Christian. And so the co-responsibility in mission is a key point, because what does it presuppose? It presupposes that there's conversation. And so you went through that here. So when you had your small groups, that was co-responsibility in the mission. My understanding is you were looking at this parish and what this parish could be. And so again, another presupposition is, or a position that I would say is like, does do you want Our Lady of Lourdes to be the same as it is today in 5 years from now? If you do, I would suggest you're kind of already on a journey of going backwards. To stay the same is not really indicative of growth. Maybe it's not in tune with what's going on around in the world. It's just, we got something that works, so we're going to stick here, and we're just going to hang on because it's good. So if you do that, then it has its weaknesses. And so to engage in a process of co-responsibility in the mission, that's where you get together and you bring your ideas from your experience with the priest, who's the pastor, and his other priest staff and leaders in the community, and you talk about maybe what it takes for this particular church, this particular parish, not to maintain the status quo, but to thrive. But again, that's maybe me suggesting something that's not part of your thinking. Do you want to thrive? If you want to thrive, and you look at co-responsibility, which is in the section B2 of the Instrumentum Laboris, it's going to take certain things to happen. And for that, it's going to take prayer and reflection. It's going to take care and respect. Listening to someone else. Oh, I've been at Our Lady of Lourdes for 600 years, and that's 300 more than you, and I know more than you. Does that happen? I don't know. I don't know the parish very well, and so I can say these things. And I haven't had conversations, so if I say something that's sensitive to you, it's not because I have this, there's no agenda here. But it's just hypothetically, I've been here longer than you, so I know how to do it right, and it has to stay this way. Deadly? Could be. I'm the only one who can do it. I have the right answer, and you need to listen to me. If you listen to me, everything's going to be great. That's not what Pope Francis is saying. That's not what Cardinal Grech is saying. That's not what Cardinal Hollerich is saying as they're going through and guiding the groups to be respectful, caring, and looking forward to what's happening in the church together, as we listen together, as we bring, not be afraid to bring your points forward, but not be so attached that you can't hear that someone else has a better idea, or some of what you say and some of what some other people say together is the best answer to make the parish thrive. So, but I mean, again, you have to have that idea that you want the parish to thrive, as opposed to, okay, no, we got the right answer. This is the formula. A plus B equals MB squared to the 14th power of the nth factorial. That's what works. Don't touch it. So if you do that, you know, and perhaps it's been done. There is thinking in the church that, you know, like I said, one Catholic press person was very kind of adamant that revelation had taken place. What are we doing here? Really? Like that, how does that sit with you? Like, I couldn't believe it myself. And it's like, yes, the Holy Spirit's on a holiday or has turned off grace. There's nothing more to do. We just have to go with what's been revealed, and we're good. That's not co-responsibility in the mission. That's not reading the signs of the times, because the times have changed, and we know that. And if we don't engage with our realities, then we're already dead. And so I think this is addressing those kinds of questions. And part of it is that Cardinal Hollerich would go on about the co-responsibility in the mission to say that all the baptized are called and have the right to participate in the mission of the church. All have an irreplaceable contribution to make. So if you look at some places, I don't know here if Father Bourgois says, it has been revealed to me, and I'm sharing it with you, you just do this, and then we're all going to be okay. So I suppose in some strange way you could say that's co-responsibility in the mission, if he tells you to do this and you do it. But that's maybe the limited, most limited kind of thing. But here it's, yes, he's the pastor. There is a cardinal who is the head of a diocese somewhere. There are cardinals who work in Rome, and the hierarchy, and then there's the Pope. And so the thing, it came up, well, how far does this co-responsibility in mission go? How far does it go when somebody says something to me and I say, well, I'm a baptized person, I can say this to you. You know, if you look at it in a negative way. So how does that get worked out? And then what is the role of the bishop? Because in the letter to the people of God, there was one paragraph that's quite interesting. And again, like with canons, they come up for reasons. And so this is a public document, but I'll just read it to you because sometimes it goes from one extreme to the next. So you might have an authoritative church leader who is in whatever role, from deacon to cardinal or the pope. They just tell you what to do and you get in line, to I'm a baptized person, so I can tell you what to do and I don't have to listen to you, and it's my church as much as it is yours. Well, not really, right? So how do we progress? How do we thrive with that? Because the priests, the bishops, they have their role. They are what some other languages would say are the responsibles. But you're responsible. The baptized person is responsible, but it's how we're responsible together. Not disrespecting anyone else, but at the end, after the synod next October, Pope Francis is going to have to come out with something, isn't he? It wasn't to be in this synod, because that's not what this synod's nature was about. But these months leading up to next October, he will come out with some sort of a statement, sometime, a document after that, based on everything that he's heard and prayed about, that he can distill and issue. But as you look at trying to emphasize something, you say, again, normal process. Other things that were there and have a place kind of can get lost or forgotten about. So the second last paragraph in the letter to the people of God: to progress further in synodal discernment, the Church particularly needs to gather even more the words and experience of the ordained ministers. Now, just remember that this is written as a summary and a reminder to everyone involved in the synodal process about what's going on. It's 2.5 pages long, so it doesn't have everything in it. The synthesis report has a lot more. But listen to what's being said here and ask yourself the question, why is the second last paragraph of this document saying this? And it'd be interesting to see some of your responses. So the Church particularly needs to gather even more the words and experience of the ordained ministers. Priests, the primary collaborators of the bishops, whose sacramental ministry is indispensable for the life of the whole body. Deacons, who through their ministry signify the care of the entire church for the most vulnerable. She also needs to let herself be questioned by the prophetic voice of consecrated life, the watchful sentinel of the Spirit's call. She also needs to be attentive to all those who do not share her faith but are seeking the truth, and in whom the Spirit, who offers everyone the possibility of being associated with this Paschal mystery, is also present and operative. Isn't that obvious about the priests and the consecrated people of consecrated life in the church? Why does it have to show up in this paragraph? Because in the whole thing that was going on, the priests were kind of forgotten about. Does that surprise you? The last sentence, it comes from Gaudium et Spes, actually. So Gaudium et Spes is quoted there, and when I'm saying she, it's referring to she, the church. She also needs to be attentive to all those who do not share her faith, but are seeking the truth, and in whom the Spirit, who, and then quote, offers everyone the possibility of being associated with this Paschal mystery, is also present and operative. So again, it is including the baptized, and it's including other religions, all religions, everyone. But it's also talking about, in particular, those in ordained ministry who during the synod, there were moments where, like, you just didn't hear about the role of the priest. And maybe there was, maybe that's because of sexual abuse and that kind of stuff where priests would be criticized. I mean, bishops are also involved in all of that. But whatever the reason, maybe it was because we need to emphasize that point about the co-responsibility and the mission comes from the interaction, this discernment, mutual respect from the baptized with the ordained ministers of the church and those in consecrated life. I mean, I often think of whether it's the Eucharistic prayer or just life in general in the church, of religious sisters and what they did, the role they played in the church. And during the synod, thinking, well, the priests are not mentioned so much, and that was okay. It was a temporary thing. They picked up on it, and that's why it's in this letter. But how many decades have gone by where mention of religious women is not more prominent?
Thank you very much. So, your comments about the priests, they certainly resonate with me. I was in a seminary for 10 years. I know a little bit about seminaries, junior seminaries, senior seminaries and stuff. But anyhow, the part of the synthesis report that I've got in my hand here,
okay,
that I was particularly interested in is section 11, deacons and priests in a synodal church. So in the end, the report, did reflect great concern about priests and their formation, and deacons as well. So there obviously was, initially, where then, as you were reading, I got that here too, about the importance of priests, and you were saying that they were sort of neglected. But in the synod itself, obviously, it got a lot of attention because it got an entire section.
Well, it
11.
did at a point. So there were days that went by where it came up in a different way, and so the emphasis did shift back to including. But for a while, people were saying, the emphasis was on the baptized and on the laity collaborating and in commission. But yes, the issue comes up about the formation of seminarians. Absolutely. It was a big issue. Big issue. Well, again, I think Pope Francis has addressed that when he could, and has done in certain ways. For example, there are 2 women, I think 2, there could be 3, but 2 at least, on now the dicastery of bishops. So Cardinal Prevost has women on his board that hear who is being recommended for priest. One's a religious sister, the other's not. So that's why I think there are 2, but there could be a third. But anyway, 2 women. So they're looking, Francis is already addressing this and looking from the women's side of women's point of view in these important sections. And one is in the Dicastery for Integral Human Development, where Cardinal Cherney from Canada, a Jesuit, is the prefect. His right hand is a woman, a religious sister, Sister Alessandra. Yeah. So again, Francis is trying to bring these things together. And as you can imagine, it takes a little time. Like, I don't know what you went through here really, but you know, maybe it would take 6 weeks to have a conversation to move that crucifix over there. You know? So you just have, you see, but that's, for some people that's super important. And it maybe goes on for 8 weeks or 10 weeks, the conversation about moving a crucifix in the church. How much more important is an issue like this in the formation of seminarians? And safeguarding and all of that. It was all taken on. Yeah. No stone was left unturned. And so again, in the wisdom of Francis, I think having 2 assemblies, very important. Do this, get the synodal practice in, which I believe happened, and people know what to do. Most of those will return next year. Through to what happens there to take on those issues more particularly after reflecting for 10 months. Because I think they're taking a little time off, which they deserve. Yeah.
Hi, thank you. I just need to know exactly how the Church or the Vatican or the Synod define the word or term co-responsibility.
Because the speakers go this way and it's muffled up there.
Right. Well, I just need to know how the term or word co-responsibility is defined by the Synod.
Okay, so again, it's I think what I was saying there about the baptized. So if you're all members of this parish and you're all baptized and you're all part of committees and the parish council or whatever entities you have, and you're meeting with the pastor and together you're deciding, there you're being responsible as a member of the parish in what's happening to the parish. Whether it's, you know, putting a new roof on or moving the crucifix or changing the carpet, or these are the programs that we're looking at that we need to develop, whether it's a new program on marriage prep or on baptism or on confession, whatever the issue is, that together you're talking about it. Right? So, but again, it's like an expectation is that you arrive at a place where you have reflected on what you're going to talk about. You know, you don't come in shooting from the hip and it's like, oh yeah, this is what I heard the other night down the street. And it's like, yeah, well, that's okay. Why don't you pray about that, read something on it, and then come back with an informed opinion. And with that informed opinion and with respect, you say what you're thinking. It's heard differently, it's shared differently, and then you move together in that with the pastor and with the other members of your community. So that's the co-responsibility. Male or female, you're baptized. The baptism is the reality. And I think Cardinal Hollerich said at one point, I don't think I read it anywhere where baptized women are less than baptized men. He did say it. It's in my notes somewhere, but yeah.
Father, was there any discussion on the Holy Eucharist itself? I was just thinking, with 1 hour allotted to our priests, and then considering also how many minutes allotted to the homily, and then you have so many people inside the church, the effect or the effect of the people, I don't think that's more effective. Because like in our home country, the church is really bursting, no? Even people outside are attending the Mass. So I was just thinking, was there any discussion on the Holy Eucharist?
I think there were discussions leading up to the Eucharist and around the Eucharist and on sacraments and on the ministers of the sacrament. Prior to the synod, Francis talked about, more than once, he talked about priests' homilies and what they should be like and how long they should be. And don't be boring people to death with your long homilies. Be prepared, have something to say, and get off the stage, sort of thing. So that's with the homilies on your point there. The Eucharist, again, you have to look at the synthesis report to see what's happening, but the Eucharist is central to everything. Yeah. Anything else as I go on?
Father, how do you encourage the synodal process when it requires freedom for participants? Because I don't think this is very much known by people, that you enter into a spiritual conversation having that spiritual freedom.
Okay, yeah, and I think that, again, that's a question I'm not surprised has come up. And so my understanding is that Our Lady of Lourdes is one of the parishes that really did engage in the synodal process. And you met several weeks and you dealt with whatever you dealt with. You came up with your own synthesis report. You presented it to the pastor. And some things have changed, I guess. I don't really know. So, was that effective? I would say one of the first things you do is you look at the success that you had and how you arrived at that. How did change happen? Was there something good? Did it bring you closer to one another? Somebody you didn't know before? Did you say, oh, they have very good ideas, or I appreciate that much more, or it's a point of view that I didn't consider, but you start to see that you're growing together. So it's a matter of knowing how to do it. Again, the Instrumentum Laboris is there. It's public. You can download it and print it. And you can see the process that the Synod went through. You can see how to do it. You can learn how to do it. You just have to do it. And that's what the Synod was about here in October, was about doing it and how to do it. And, so it's called the Instrumentum Laboris is the working instrument. But so labor is the connecting word there. So it's not like it's a labor, but it was a labor of love. And again, you have to give the time, you have to be prepared, and you have to have some idea of where you're going and the objective that you want to go there together.
Just a quick question here. So you talked about process, which is something near and dear to my heart. So in the synthesis report, they had three sort of sections. And the first one was convergence, and then the second one was consideration, and then proposals. Are you going to talk about the process by which they arrived at convergence, for consideration, and proposals?
No.
No, you're not going to do that.
No, thanks.
But obviously there was a process that led to the synthesis report.
Yes.
And the sense I had reading it was that, okay, there's convergence, that somebody went out there or was taking note of what people were agreeing on, in a sense.
So that was all done. Everything was recorded by cameras and mics, And also, sitting at our table, there were 2 priests who shared shifts for the day, day after day, and they had a green ledger, hard-covered ledger book like this, and they recorded everything that happened. So what was going on there, all of the synthesizing of what was being heard, that came together, and a group that was elected from the participants got together, and their shift started at 9 p.m. after a very long day with events in the synod and then a mass. They spent that night writing the report, and that group was made up of cardinals and theologians and other writers. So they brought everything together. Their job was to do that synthesis, but it didn't come from what they thought should be in it. It came from what was gathered, what was reflected on, what was distilled to what it could be, and then they wrote it and articulated it, putting what they could do the best job they could, doing the best job they could, put it together in the synthesis report. And again, the synthesis report is just that. It's a synthesis report. If you look at the last paragraph on page 25 of Instrumentum Laboris, it talks about the process of what's going to happen. That in this synod, the synod is not going to tell the Pope what to do. The listening is going to take place. It'll be distilled. That information will come together, be prayed over this coming year. Next year, there's likely to be voting. Likely, I can't say, because it's not happened yet and it's not out what's going to happen. Voting on those issues that are there and a way forward. Recommendations will be given to the Holy Father, and he will decide what happens. So again, there you have the synodal process. This is commission. You might have the extreme critics say, well, we were in the process, and now the Pope is going to decide. So let's say that he does decide, and he writes the document, the response, the fruits of the Second Synod. Well, what I said wasn't in there, or it's not in there. And my idea was a really good one. You know, there's not going to be a pleasing of everyone, but there has to be some, and Francis sees that there has to be a new way forward, including women in decision-making and so on. But at the end, he is the responsible. He's the pontiff. He will write what we are to follow. Now, he has to do that from his office, from the chair of Peter. And if we don't respect that, that's your problem. You know, that would be my problem if I don't understand that. But again, he is responsible for doing that. But did he sit at home and come up with that on his own? Absolutely not. It's coming from 2 synods, October next year, the one that just happened, and 2 years of various phases leading up to this. So it's all of that together with the theologians and cardinals responsible for it, all talking all the time. But he has to issue it at the end. Yeah. I think there's someone with the mic there.
Good morning, Father. As the body of Christ, we are aging. So I know that Pope Francis has a big concern about the future of the Church. And I would like to understand what is the synodality about the youth, like what is his concern about the future, and how can we address these issues here in our parish? How can we achieve his goals, whatever it's been discussed? How can the youth, how can the people on the church, like, doesn't matter what age, because youth is age is just a number. You can be youth in any age. So how can we, as big community which is so much diverse, how can we address and achieve the goals that the synod is addressing?
Okay, so for me, I can stand here and give you the answer to that and just say, start doing it next week. No, not synodal, right? So let's say that you took the issue of youth, like you just raised, and you start practicing synodality around the question of youth, and together you say, well, here's what the issue is. It is a church issue. How are you going to address it here? You got to figure it out. What do people think? And then come up with it. And so, but I'll tell you that one of the things that's in the various reports is the internet as missionary territory. Makes sense? I mean, the Canadian Jesuits were twinned. Like this happened in the Jesuits all over the world, where you had some Western provinces of the Jesuits that were doing well, had all kinds of vocations, and they would send them, and we Canadian Jesuits went to places like Darjeeling and Bhutan and Zambia and so on, and built schools and educated people and stuff like that. That was a thing that happened. That was missionary territory. St. Ignatius sends off St. Francis Xavier to the east. Kind of one of his first assignments, if not the first, of missioning one of the Jesuits, his closest friend. I'm going to send you off and I'm never going to see you again. Francis Xavier went off and he baptized by the thousands. I joke with my friends from Goa and say, you know, Goa is Catholic because of Francis Xavier. I mean, his relics, a lot of his relics are there. But so the thing is, first of all, like this came up, and there were like, so that's a part of the synod. If somebody came up with the line, the internet is mission territory. Okay, so we all say, do you agree with that? Everybody says yes, because it is. It's a different kind of mission territory than was Zimbabwe when Jesuits went there and built a school. So what do we do in this context? If the internet is mission territory, the question is, how do we, since we agree to that, how do we evangelize through the internet? Because we know there's a lot of evangelizing that's going on with, let's just say, the fashion industry is pretty good at evangelizing, aren't they? You know? You need this very nice hat. You need this very nice scarf. You need this ring. Or they're very good. And some would say that that's marketing. And so evangelizing has a different focus. First of all, Jesus Christ is at the center of evangelization. If it's Hermes that's selling their $6,000 scarf, you might say, maybe it's not Jesus that's at the center of that. It might be profit and beauty and some good things. Like, I'm not saying that it's all bad, but I'm saying, you know, the focus is different. So what's the focus here? It's not everything else, it's what it is for this. And mission territory is the internet. And in some ways, I think, you know, just finishing a job at Salt and Light, I would say, absolutely. How do we get the young people involved? A Jesuit principle of education was, go in their door and bring them out yours. Young people have so much energy and talent, and in one way or another, whether they're just blatantly aware of it, that they need something, they want something more, but don't know where to go? I would say when you would hear sometimes people would say, oh, the young people today, you know, they're not like they used to be. And I'm going, yep, good thing. Good thing they're not. And if you have a criticism about the young people, my question would be, what have you done? Right? So again, this whole process is calling each person to responsibility, not to pointing fingers, but to say, oh, maybe I've done this. Otherwise, did you ever watch The Muppets? There are two characters in The Muppets that I really like, and their names are Statler and Waldorf. And Statler and Waldorf sit up in the loges, and there's a performance going on the stage, and these are people who've rehearsed and they're doing the show. And they're sitting up there, and they're going, and they're always making fun of it and pointing out everything that's wrong. So I think, like I've heard with somebody of a certain rank, I won't say who or what rank, said to me one time, yeah, you know, the young people today. I'm going, yeah, that's right. That's where we see them. And it's our fault, because we haven't done anything. What are we doing? Take it on. You know, how do you fill this place with young people? I don't have the answer, but that's a good thing that I don't, because everybody could have some angle or some understanding of how to do it. Maybe it's going in their door through the internet and getting them engaged somehow with something that's good and meaningful, that eventually leads them to want to meet in person in a real place like this. Go on a retreat or something, you know. And again, like some people would say, you know, you talk about, let's move that crucifix 2 feet this way, and then everybody's in an uproar. And that's about moving a crucifix. Like, is it really that important? But people will get their knickers in a twist over it. And it'll go on, and people will be offended. I'm not coming back to church anymore. They moved that crucifix. Is that reasonable? So we have to be reflecting on ourselves, saying, am I being reasonable? Is it reasonable that we're not reaching out to the youth, or that the youth aren't here? Are we happy then that most of the room is gray-haired or bald? You know? So those are very important questions, but we arrive at them together co-responsibly. Yeah. Yeah, you had a question. And I'm just, again, standing here because I can hear it a bit better with the speakers going that way.
In the final analysis, I gather there is going to be a declaration of some sort as to the conclusion, and that is going to be as a result of the discussions of the opinions, and some of the opinions might be discarded at the, maybe even the parish level or something like that, decided not to bring that forward. And you say that Pope John will be, I'm sorry, Pope Francis. Sorry, Pope
that
John.
Was a good slip, though.
Pope John was the Vatican II, right? Okay, the decision of all this now, and I understand the whole process, and I think it's an excellent idea. And going up through and the cardinals and everything. When it gets to the Pope, okay, if there are some, and probably not, some ambiguities in it, I suspect there might be. There always is in things concerning life and values and everything like that. My question is that before the Pope issues his declaration, okay, does the Curie have any part to do in this?
I think it depends on who he consults, but the curial cardinals are in touch with him all the time. All the cardinals around the world, that's the idea of a cardinal, his closest advisors. But he also has the Council of Cardinals, or the C9, because there are 9 of them. And they're very close to him. They meet a few times a year. They just finished meeting last week. And Cardinal Lacroix from Quebec City was appointed as one of them. And it's a very big deal to be appointed to that group. So they're talking about the issue of, the church being too masculine. It has to be balanced better. They did talk about that last week. So I don't know how that sits with people. And when you talk about ambiguities, okay, let me just play the devil's advocate here and just tease you for a minute. It's like, no, this is going to be the answer and there's no ambiguity, just do it. Because human life just needs a program to follow. And if everybody follows that program, it's going to work. So now if I stop joking, because I think that would be a disaster to imagine that the Pope is going to come out with this and everybody just does it. It's a result of the Synod. Well, I think you'd be suspicious there. If you think that the Pope can arrive at some definitive answer that's going to apply everywhere in the world after all we've learned from the synodal processes and from cultures that are much more respected now, and languages and people's experience, you know that maybe something that works brilliantly at Our Lady of Lourdes in Toronto or in the Archdiocese of Toronto somewhere is not going to work in Cameroon or Congo. It's not going to do it there. Why? They all believe in Jesus. We all believe in Jesus. But there are these cultural realities in those places where you could try all you want. It's not going to work there. It works perfectly here. So there has to be some openness to it. Is it possible to say that the ambiguities, where we would think, oh, you're being ambiguous, that kind of sounds like a negative thing. Or you don't know what you're talking about, or you should have thought more about this before you spoke, or you're playing both sides of the fence, or you're talking out of both sides of your mouth. You're ambiguous. Is there a positive side to ambiguity? To being ambiguous? So let's just say, for example, if you're tuning an instrument, that the instrument is in tune from here to here. Say it's a piano string. And the piano tuner takes it and really turns it so that it's way out of tune. So it's outside of this or it's outside of that. Then has a perfect, let's say it's middle C, has a tuning fork of middle C, and then starts cranking the little gizmo that tightens the string and hits the key, and eventually you see where that string is causing this tuning fork to resonate because they're in sync. That can happen, however, within this area. Not precisely here. There is a sweet spot, but in here it's still in tune. You know, again, it's like even here, it's from one person to the next. This is what I think. You know, Bugwa and I joke all the time because we're both the 9th in our families. Like, and we look at the world a certain way. Daryl, there's somebody over there. We look at the world a certain way and we kind of laugh, you know, and we joke about ourselves that we're the 9th and we see the world a certain way because we're the 9th in the birth row rank. And so, you know, ambiguity can be a good thing, or the tuning is not precisely there, but out here it works still, and out here it still works. And in that, and even maybe a bit outside, when it's not so in tune, is what starts the next conversation. And people are not going to feel excluded from things. It's always got to move on. It always has to be moving forward, or we're dead.
Father, I'm trying to sort of reconcile some of what you said in terms of the co-responsibility for mission. Is this the word you used? The call of the baptized. So all of us baptized as individuals have some sort of co-responsibility for this larger body, which is the church. And how do we go forward into the future with it? I'm just listening to you and wondering if there is a contradiction in what you're trying to achieve from the synodal process, and that's not a criticism of synodality in any way. One of the things that I find happening more in our church, especially in the internet age, is that we kind of put labels on people without even knowing them, without haven't spoken to them, but maybe they might come to church wearing a long dress and therefore they're this and that. And we're talking about broader Christian unity and the body of Christ, but the kind of iciness we can, and it comes from priest towards people, people towards people, people to, and it's the saddest things for me, but that's an aside. What I'm trying to say is, here you're giving us an example about a conversation around moving this crucifix and trying to arrive at some consensus. And that can go on for 8 weeks or 8 years or 8 centuries if we wanted to. On the other hand, each one of the baptized has a certain sort of gift that they can bring to the table. And if we flatten everything to this conversation, I find our church is kind of afraid of using the gifts of individuals. And because of that, we tend to be following behind the world. And that pains me so much. That if we claim to be the church founded by Christ with all the gifts of the Holy Spirit, and we've been there for so long, why do we always seem to be going after the curve to be talking about the excluded and the marginalized and the LGBT? To me, we should be the leaders there. And if we're not, are we just responding to the buzzwords of the world? And then we bring it in here for the sake of the high of having conversations. And I get a sort of false sense of community from this, because someone might have an idea and they're really passionate about it, and it might succeed in terms of how do I bring youth to church. And it must go through the synodal process, and by the time you're done, the youth have grown up, they've moved on to the next thrill that the secular media is throwing at them. So I think my question is, I mean, other than the divide of...
Question, right?
Sorry?
Your question.
Okay, well, my question is, how do we, I mean, at the end of the day, we still have to go and try to embrace our fallen away and our separated brethren who have gone their own way and who didn't obey and who didn't wait, but we still have to accept they belong, and we're trying to bring them back in. But within our own church, when individuals come up with ideas, and often it is not even the priest, you have the gatekeepers who have been there for 40 years, and anybody who raises their finger because of be eliminated. And how do we deal with this so that we can have the vibrancy of recognition that as the body, each of us might have a different part that is more dominant, and that has to be allowed to flourish without everything going through a 5-year synodal process. We can come
right
to a consensus.
Okay, I think I have an idea of what you're saying, and it gets back to your question about what do we do here in the synodal process. And I think, first of all, nothing is going to be perfect, and there's going to be stuff you can achieve along the way, depending on your level of care and respect and honesty and ability to put the hours in and do the work, and be willing to really say, with respect and care, what you think, and listen to what other people think. Because like I said at the beginning, you know, I may come into a meeting and think that I've got the answer, And I use this joke about the crucifix there, moving that, like, I know that the crucifix is best placed on this pillar here at 2 feet above the floor. And clearly, I don't think I'm right, objectively. We're going to put the crucifix right there. That doesn't make any sense. But some people come to meetings and they think that they have the idea, and they're really convinced. And in all sincerity, they would say something, and I use that as a silly example. But they're not open to listening to what other people say. So we have to have that disposition. We have to be willing to do that. Now, if you say that somebody's been in a job for 40 years and they're the only person who can do it, that's a particular issue. You might, like that's in organizational structures and behavior, and how do you do that? What's the best structure for this particular place at this time? You have to ask those questions. And then there has to be an openness to it. And then, let's say I'm really rich. And I come to this meeting because I give to this church. And I'm really rich. And I think that crucifix should go right there. The crucifix there, but how's that going to sit with everybody else? But I've got the right idea. So, I have the right idea. And I'm telling you what the right idea is. So, but that's not going to work. Right? So you have to work at something that's going to work and something that's not going to take 5 years to get done. I mean, there are just some things. And part of that is you have to be saying, and I really think this is what's going on in the synodal process. Francis is acknowledging, and this is my own thinking, Francis is acknowledging a basic human thing that is breaking down. And that is how we speak to each other and how we say, and an initial openness to, that's a really good idea. Or I bet I've got an idea, I'm going to go to that meeting, and I bet somebody's got a better idea than mine. Is that how I go to a meeting? Or is it I'm going to a meeting and that meeting and I'm going to tell them what I think and I have the right answer? So there's a way that we don't talk to each other anymore. We have to be taught how to talk to each other, I think. And I think that the emphasis on the synodal process was just that, because people sitting around the table, for example, okay, here's an example. And this is not telling secrets out of school, but the issue of the round table. Is there a head of the table? There was no head. There was a facilitator, and the facilitator could have been a man, a woman, ordained, religious, or not, whatever, a cardinal, a priest. And the facilitator ran the table. Sometimes Cardinal X would be going over his 5 minutes, and the facilitator, a woman, would have to say, "Eminence, thank you very much, you're done." Shock. But that changed over time. That might have been the first time a cardinal was ever told by a lay woman that he was out of time. So that there's hope. But again, it's what do you bring to the table? What do you bring? Like, are you there with humility? Are you there with the idea that I only want the best thing for the community? So let's say if you're talking about here, that applies here like it applies to the synod. I only want what is the best for the church. And if you all think that we're all white Catholic Irish people descent in this church, clearly just looking around, you'd have to say, well, I think you're wrong. And that's a good thing. But sometimes in the past, you'd have the Hungarian parish, you'd have the Italian parish, you'd have the Polish parish, you'd have this and that, and people stuck together in their groups. That's changed. It's changing. It's not changed completely, but the openness is there. To imagine that somebody from Nagasaki has something to say to me from Stellarton, Nova Scotia. Or Stellarton, Nova Scotia to somebody in Cameroon, you know? It's like, but isn't that a beautiful thing? It's possible. I think we have to have hope that it's going to happen. And the ambiguity thing, it's never, I don't want to get at an answer. You know, we have certain beliefs. We believe in Jesus Christ. That's a start, you know. And we believe in God. We believe in the Holy Spirit. And in moments like this, I say, look to the Holy Spirit, because the Holy Spirit is the love that exists between the Father and the Son. Dive into the love, because that's what it's about. It's not me overpowering you or being better than you. It's like I'm arriving because I think I might have something to add, or at least I'm going to listen to see if I get an idea from what other people say to move the project forward.
Hi, Father. I'm a parishioner in this church for many years. But I must say that this is just a comment that I feel so lucky and so blessed to be part of Synod process twice. When I was very young, I was a recipient of the process Synod did in the 70s. So the youth were the focus at that time. And now I'm a senior. I'm so happy that I've been part of the Synod process in our church. So I hear you saying it's evolving, it's changing. And the decisions made during the process of Synod are not just applicable for that time. It could move on. Like using myself as an example, I was part of Synod not as a participant in the 70s, but as a young person then, we were invited to be part of our church. I'm from the Philippines, so at that time they used the young people to speak on the pulpit during the Easter celebration. So we were the first group of young people asked. So I was a participant in a different way. But now that I'm a grown-up, a senior at that, I'm so blessed that I am now part of the conversation, which we should feel privileged to be part of that conversation that I'm hoping won't stop for the seniors group, because the Synod has been thinking about different age group, different groups of people. But it's like a living project that doesn't stop.
Well, I agree. And that's what it should be. The church is alive.
Yes.
That you had that process, and you say what's going on here is similar to what happened there. People will say, centuries ago, the Synod process was alive and well from the beginning of the church, 2,000 years ago. This is how things were done. And we lost that. And you would have, say, certain groups who today would be very, very critical of Pope Francis in engaging the church in a synodal process, because it's his idea, he wants to do this, he wants to do that. They come up with all kinds of stuff. It's not new. This isn't new.
Yeah.
They want to say that it's new, so it fits their agenda. But again, that's where you have to think critically. And again, you can't do everything at once.
No.
You have to make a list, prioritize it. We got to deal with these things first. 1, 2, and 3 before 10. You know, and like you said, I'm privileged to be part of it. So if that's your if that's your starting point, if you know that you're privileged to be part of it, that can change everything. And you got to find your happiness too. Like,
yes.
I mean, things have to be calibrated in a certain way. And if you're off a bit, maybe someone in your group can help you, you know, and maybe not directly, but by listening to somebody else, you can correct yourself and expand your limits, you know.
And it's so true, Father. We've had a lot of listening in our group. And that's really, I'm very proud of the group that we had in this church, a lot of listening. So thank you for sharing the behind the scenes.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, no, I think we're probably close to being done because it's 11:18.
I think Valerie has given me permission to take the last question. So,
see?
So
that's loaded.
Yes, we were privileged as a parish to go through the process that we did. Then we've also been privileged to be able to sit here and listen to this second part of the synod that just came to a completion in Rome. And you speak about the synod that is, the process that is coming in October 2024. From your wisdom, what would you share with us as in this coming year as a parish? What are the key areas we should focus on in light of preparing ourselves for 2024?
I think that's a very good question. I think it's there are multi answers, responses. I think, is my mic off? No, it's on. Okay, so the synod process had the 2 years leading up to the continental phase to last year, these months leading to next October, and it doesn't end there. So you engaged at whatever levels you did and however you did on whatever topics. You prepared a report. The Instrumentum Laboris is available. It's look at that. Look at the letter to the people of God. Look at the synthesis report and pick something that makes sense to you here. What do you need to do? I don't know what you need to do. You're the parish. You know. And if you don't know, you can ask the question, what do we need to do now? What should we be doing? And then come up with things. But if you had those listening sessions and they were good, so remember, good is good. It's a very simple expression that a teacher I hired in Winnipeg when I was working there would say, Father, just let me remind you, good is good. You know, and you kind of think it was kind of silly. But then she would say, but remember this, better is better. So it was good that you listened and you led up to the synod. Find out what the synod did. Read about it. Stay tuned. Tune in to Vatican media. Get on their mailing list. Watch what the Pope is saying. The Pope is saying something every day. Every day. Unless he's in surgery or something. But, you know, it's basically every day you can listen to what's going on and then say, how can that apply here? And can we continue those listening groups? See what comes out of the listening. But you're doing it together and you're following the synodal process. And then pay attention to what's happening there. Because what you did here directly connects to what happened in Rome. Absolutely. It just does. What you did here is a mini version of that around the same Jesus and the same church. And what they did there will connect here. But not if you're not aware of it. Yeah, you have to be aware. And so you have to read things, you know, like a surgeon has to read up on new drugs and sharper scalpels, you know, or they're out of it. And if we're not reading and we're not participating, the church is moving. are we moving with it? I think I'm done. And they're probably done with me.
I don't think we're... Father Allen, thank you so much for your generosity in time and sharing your enthusiasm for all of what has gone on. I think, and I'm going to suspect people here gathered with us today will agree that this is truly good news for us as a church.
I would just say one final thing is, I'm not an authority on the church. I'm not, a voting member of the synod. I was there for the whole month. I was in the middle of it all and worked around getting the right message out through the media with my colleagues. There were many of us. But one voice and one reflection is just to say, be encouraged in what you did do, and don't stop there, But again, I'm not the authority on this. There's a guy in white, he's the authority, and those participants who will again surface next year, and people like Cardinal Grech and Cardinal Ulrich. So not me, but them. But stay tuned. Yeah.
But you were there, and you picked it all up. My mother used to say to me, growing up, and as I was ready to give birth to children, that it's called labor for a reason. It hurts, it's painful, it's messy, but it's wonderful. And new life that comes from that labor is to be celebrated, and you've given us every reason, especially as you described I had to write it down, instrumentum laboris, that for us it will continue to be a labor of love and a labor of listening. And we thank you for breaking that open for us. And I would say, too, as sitting here as a member of our parish, how hopeful it has been to listen to each other's questions. They've been deep, they've been provocative, and they will move us forward. So you've given us that opportunity, too, to listen to each other once again.
And I wish you luck, and I'm sorry if I didn't really hear your question precisely. The acoustics are going that way, and I just couldn't make out some details of what you were saying. So I was trying to do my best to answer what I thought you asked me. So
you did well. Okay. And just as I finish saying thank you to you on behalf of our parish, I will also say thank you to Father Bourgois. We were one of 2 parishes in the whole Archdiocese who were invited to do this. And we've done it well, and we will continue to do it well. So thank you, Father Bourgois, for that as well.
Yes, thank you. Okay. And thank you for inviting me. Thank you very much, and all the best. I look forward to talking to my Jesuit confreres to see how you're doing. I live very close to here, and I go to Mass in the morning at 8 o'clock usually, but I really don't know the parish that well, so I look forward to seeing good things happen. More good things. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.